Howdy. This here old show may contain some cussing, some discussions of a non-biblical nature, and if that sort of thing does not sound like something you'd be interested in listening to, then I would suggest you turn around right now, fella, and just head out the other way. Saloon's down the street. They got some nice girls there.
They must be destroyed on sight.
All right, we're back for episode 73 of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, a movie podcast, and we're continuing our look at spaghetti westerns, and we're going to be talking about two sort of semi-horror entries into the spaghetti western genre, and two of the most interesting and unique films in the genre as well. I am your host, Lee, 4 candles for my cult, Russell, and I'm joined by my co-host himself, Daniel. God made them, I killed them, Harper, and Paul may jump in. But how are you doing there, Daniel?
I'm doing well. I'm a couple of beers in already, so we're going to have a nice little recording session.
Yeah, I'm drinking scotch. We're keeping it very casual. None of us are prepared this time around, or prepared less than usual.
I have no plot summaries this week because fuck it. I don't know. Does anybody care? Like that's kind of what I want to know. Like, are people actually like chomping at the bit for my plot summaries, because I do put a lot of work into those. So, it would help me to know, like, if people actually care. So we'll see if the download numbers change this week or not.
Yeah. Well, let us know. I mean, we have a handy Facebook group. They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook. Just go there. Tell us. Do you like Daniel's plot summaries, or do you want them stricken from the podcast altogether? We probably won't abide by either of your decisions, but, it's nice to know anyway.
I might just start writing them for the ones that interest me, as opposed to all of them. Like, if people don't like them, so, we'll see.
But speaking of polls, we do have a poll on the group right now. If you scroll down a little ways, you'll find it. It's one of the more recent posts. Basically, it's just sort of getting a feeling for what you guys want to hear after October, which is already set in stone, basically, for what we're doing. We've got a few movies selected for main episodes. I have almost half of the bonus episodes done. There might be even a lot more bonus content, depending on who submits stuff, if they do have the time, because we did throw the feelers out to some of our podcasting friends if they were interested in recording little mini bits for bonus stuff. As it stands, there are now 2 full bonus episodes recorded, and I'm doing another one, supposedly, with Paul tomorrow night. We're going to have all kinds of stuff in October. The poll asked the question, what do you sort of want to see afterwards? And right now, neck and neck with 3 votes each is Italian horror and sci-fi. If you haven't voted on the poll, vote on the poll. We're pretty much going to cover everything that's listed on the poll. It's just, I just want to sort of gauge where I'm going to place it in the schedule, basically, is what I'm getting at with that thing. So if you have the time, just vote on the poll, and we'll see where it goes.
And of course, I'm just going to throw my shit in and just be like, no, we have to cover this like 3 weeks from now. And Lee just goes, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that'll probably happen too. Now let's do this romantic comedy in the middle of October, Lee. Okay.
I think I'm going to press for the one I've been pressing you for is the Basic Instinct Showgirls episode. I think I want to do that before Christmas.
Sure.
Who wants to hear that? Who wants to hear that? Like, leave us the notes in the Facebook group.
You want to hear about women murdering people?
I do. I think it's a good thing to hear. Really.
Yeah. We do have some comments, so we'll go through these on our Perfect Timing Hard Bodies episode from a little while back. Derby Stardom says, Perfect Timing used to come on in the mid-'80s on HBO and Showtime in the middle of the night one year. I bought it on VHS when it came out. It is truly better than Hard Bodies. It had a 70s feel, but in the 80s. I remember it because of the wonderful actress Michelle Scarabelli. Yeah. Yep. That's interesting to see. It actually did come on like HBO or one of those ones at some point.
Yeah, I would have been too young at that. I mean, it would have been... I didn't have HBO at that point. I wasn't staying up till 3 a.m. watching shitty flicks in 1987 or whatever. Yeah, no, it's kind of amazing because it's so obscure and forgotten now that it's almost like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that like back in the 80s. Yeah. I had it on VHS. Like I can imagine there was a time period where you could buy that VHS for like $1 on a dollar bin. And
Yeah, now you can sell it on eBay.
It really just makes you think I should go and buy all the movies from the dollar bin, save them for 40 years, and then like sell them all for like 100 times what I paid for them.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to see if DVDs sort of have the same value in like 30 years. You got the DVD of fucking Starship Troopers. Wow, man, I got to get a fucking hold of that. You know, everyone else is watching these fucking new trendy fucking hologram virtual reality versions of these movies where you're in them. But no, I want to have the experience of being outside the movie and watching it on a disc.
I want to pretend it's 1998 and I'm watching this. I've even got an old shitty TV. I'm going to put it on, you know.
Yeah. I don't want an immersive experience. I want it on digital, damn it. In about 30 years, I can be a very rich man. I can sell all this shit on eBay or whatever the counterpart is at that point. I've got, thousands of movies right now on DVD. So yeah.
There was an episode of Amazing Stories with Mark Hamill as this itinerant guy who collected junk, who literally did that. Held on to all the things that he loved, and then the whole thing was he was an old man, and then suddenly sold it all and made millions. And therefore, it was okay to hold on to all your childhood for your entire life, because then you get to be like 80 and you just sell it all and you make a bunch of money.
If it wasn't for the guy's career skyrocketing again with the new fucking Star Wars and having a pretty decent career in between anyways with Batman, the animated series and stuff like that, I could have made the joke of him just being one of those guys at a vendor table at a fucking Star Wars con somewhere selling fucking vintage action figures of himself for $800.
Yeah, I mean, it's Star Wars doesn't, I mean, other fandoms definitely do that, but Star Wars seems to have not gone that way, at least for the leads.
Yeah.
Not quite got the Galaxy Quest treatment,
CB Fall says, I never liked this movie, period. Very great podcast. And that was in relation to Django. So, yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. And we do have a question to be posed to all of us for Movie God. And this is cool because if you listen to the last episode, I have a little music cue now for There Can Be Only One Filmography. And I also recorded a music cue for Movie God games. So every time we do it now, I can use that music cue. And I didn't expect to be able to use it so quickly. So thank you, Jack Graham.
Movie God.
And he asks, basically, Movie God, we have to eliminate one of these people from the timeline. So it's going to be either Ray Harryhausen or Jim Henson. Pose it to you first there, Daniel.
The thing is, it's not so much fun because you don't get to, because I did read this ahead of time, so I kind of knew it was coming. Jim Henson means a lot more to me, just personally, than Ray Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen probably, Ray Harryhausen definitely means more to the history of cinema because you might argue without Ray Harryhausen there might not have been a Jim Henson. Mm-hmm. But I think Jim Henson, even without a Ray Harryhausen, Jim Henson would have had some kind of career. It might not have been in puppetry. But Jim Henson is so fundamental to myself and my wife, just because he brings that kind of humanism and everything to his work. And Harryhausen, as brilliant as he was, I kind of think of as more of a technician. So to me, if I've got to kill one, I kill Harryhausen.
Okay.
Despite the fact that that's terrible. I mean, it's awful to kill Harryhausen, but it's a terrible, terrible Hobson's choice that Jack has presented us with. But if you make me choose, I keep Jim Henson.
All right, that's fair. I have to go with keeping Harryhausen. I think basically
because you're a monster.
I am a monster, and I love guys who make monsters. I think it sort of I was thinking about this, and I was like, okay, I think this question essentially boils down to who had more of an impact on you growing up watching the movies. And for me, it's always going to be Harryhausen. Don't get me wrong, I love everything that came out of Jim Henson's studio for the most part. A lot of stuff. I mean, even later on, watching Farscape and stuff like that, I love that shit. But Harryhausen, he basically started a lot of this shit. I mean, he was a master technician. He was a workhorse. I mean, he did all this shit himself, and just the amount of shots he had to set up and the amount of shots he had to take for even the simplest movements in these films, and he made a lot of them come to life and made you suspend your disbelief and accept what you were watching in the movie, even though it was stop motion. Just really have to go with Harryhausen because I grew up watching more of his stuff than I did Jim Henson, basically where it falls. Fuck you for asking a question, Jack.
And that might very well be the 3 years, 4 years age difference between the two of us as to whether you're a Harryhausen or a Henson fan.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about the fact that Henson now has his own legacy with the Creature Workshop and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like a hard question to ask because there is this continuum between the two, right? Harryhausen leads to Henson in this very real way. I guess what I'm saying is that without Harryhausen, I think Henson still kind of exists. He may not even be a puppeteer. I think Henson would have had a fascinating career even without, that kind of thing. Or maybe he just becomes Harryhausen without Harryhausen being that kind of guy, So, I mean, it is just kind of it's so up in the air. But, you make me choose. Henson means more to me personally, and so I choose Henson. But Harryhausen was obviously a genius and so much great stuff that I love Harryhausen as well. It really is a terrible choice, but sorry, I'm over explaining. But
Jack Graham's a terrible man for asking that question.
Well, it's just because he's a Marxist that he makes us choose these things.
Evil man. Yeah.
So I did have actually a comment from Jack Graham on our Starship Troopers episode, which not even isn't really about our Starship Troopers episode, but he had never seen the film, and I was kind of chatting with him, and then he posted a little bit on Twitter. So I'm not reading anything particular, but I wanted to share with you his interpretation of Starship Troopers, kind of in big picture form. He saw Starship Troopers and thought it was brilliant because, in his mind, the film is the in-universe propaganda film made by the government to sell the war to the populace. So essentially, you look at the film itself, and the reason it looks like Triumph of the Will is because it basically is this Triumph of the Will for this 25th century or whatever future. And then suddenly that explains why all the acting is so wooden and why it's just really dumb action scenes and it completely justifies all the all the things that I complained about. And I feel bad because I feel like I gave a slightly superficial reading of that film when we reviewed it, but I don't because I feel like I was just bored by the shit, so I was that was the answer I gave. But it totally salvages the film if you view it through that lens.
Yeah, it does. And I wouldn't have thought of that, honestly, but that's a very simple but at the same time really interesting interpretation of that. That does just totally change everything.
I mean, my answer to that and my response is, well, okay, so if that's the film, it's still kind of a one-note nothing. I mean, it's still kind of, once you get that, it's oh, that's fascinating and great, but it doesn't really change my enjoyment of the film, It just kind of goes oh, well, okay, so it's meant to be all these things that it just is, sort of thing. So, I don't know. I still think it's kind of a misstep by Verhoeven and Neumeier. I mean, I don't think it's as good a film as RoboCop was.
Yeah, because I can kind of look at it.
It's not sophisticated,
I can sort of look at it if we're going for that. If we're going for that, this is the propaganda film and it emulates all the sort of points that any previous propaganda film would. So in this universe, it probably would have been knowingly and decidedly made to emulate past propaganda films and fit a certain structure, fit a certain style, and get a certain message across. Then it's probably no different from what you see in our world where people try to do pastiches and homages to old horror films and they recreate the style perfectly, but if they're recreating a shitty movie, they're still making a shitty movie at the end of the day.
Right.
And if it's not entertaining or all that good, then it's still not all that entertaining or all that good. The key is when you emulate the aesthetics and the style of a previous movie from a different time period, and you make it interesting and better at the same time, but at the same time making it feel authentic. So this feels authentically like Triumph of the Will, but at the same time, actually, it's not even quite as good as Triumph of the Will. It's
really not.
No.
No, with no insult to Paul Verhoeven, Leni Riefenstahl is a brilliant filmmaker.
I'm sorry, Verhoeven, you just didn't make as good a Nazi movie as as he did. But still, when we were doing the review, I still did like it a bit better than you did. But I mean, just taking it as a movie as it is, the narrative structure, the characters, the stories, all that shit. it just kind of falls flat for the most part. I mean, there's some fun stuff in it that I liked a bit more than you did, but for the most part, it's like it fails as an action film.
It's kind of a fascinating film, like metatextually, just because it's like, why does this fail? And I think that's kind of where, you know, like, if you view it as a propaganda film made by the Federation in the, you know, in universe, suddenly like all of the failures make sense, because of course they're like complete fucking fascists who have no idea about how to make a compelling or interesting movie. Of course all of this is shitty because it's made by shitty people.
Yeah.
I really feel like a couple more passes on the script would have been all it would have taken to really like make that thing sing, and then like recasting half the film. But you know,
Yeah.
You know, you got like 4 lead roles, and like 2 of them are really not so great.
Or just have Dina Meyer in it, starring in it, and cast her more like they did with the female lead and was it Edge of Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Recently? Like that's kind of the same idea.
Just don't have the one Rico character. Just have Dizzy. Kind of wander around and entering the mobile infantry and fall into fascism. That would be and then die, and have a boyfriend, and then we follow the boyfriend for 10 minutes.
Yeah, we've made a better movie.
Yeah.
Why are we sitting here, Daniel, and not fucking writing screenplays?
Why are we not millionaires? Is really the question. You know?
Exactly. I do like Jack's idea, though. That is an interesting twist on the whole thing. So, very, very nice.
Yeah, I haven't heard him comment. I know he was planning on watching John and Mnemonic, but I don't know that he's watched it yet, and I haven't heard him say anything about it. Which
maybe
is probably
he did.
for the best.
Yeah, maybe he did, and he just hates us now. He doesn't want to talk to us about it.
He's like, yeah, fuck that shit. No, I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah. And you get a little curt message on Twitter. You're no longer invited to any of my podcasts, Daniel.
Because he watched John Mnemonic, and it's actually, you know what? If you ask me which one I'd rather rewatch again right now, it's probably John Mnemonic, just because it's bad in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Whereas Starship Troopers kind of bored the shit out of me, so you know.
Yeah.
Movies need only 3 things: badasses.
You tell me who you want done, and I'll do the hell out of it.
A chick with drive who don't take no jive.
Boobs.
Do you know that the female breast, known to be the source of life since Eve, can be deadly weapons?
And body counts.
Body count. The mathematics of murder and menace.
The BB and BC podcast is your source for exploitation film discussion of B-movies. You can find the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio by searching for BB and BC podcast. You can also listen to each episode directly from the show's website located at badassesboobsandbodycounts.com.
Let's go to work.
Clytus, I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you destroy this Earth?
Destroy it utterly.
Send Rick and Danny in Wool Rocket Ajax.
So, just destroy it?
That's what Ming said. Don't you ever listen?
Well, there's no arguing with Ming.
Hail Ming. Wait! You see those transmissions on the Visua screen?
Crow? Nightmare on Elm Street?
Chud 2? Black Belt Jones?
Nightbreed?
What's a critter?
Oh, I've seen those things.
Flash? I guess we could wait a while before the destruction.
Yeah, and watch the movies.
And talk about them.
The Hell Ming Power Hour. Disobedience to Ming. For now.
You can find us at Legion Podcast.
You can find us on Facebook.
iTunes.
We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
You know what? Just Google it for yourself.
Just Google it, you bastages.
Hail Ming. Breaking 2? Electric Boogaloo?
Samurai Cop?
Army of Darkness?
Flash Dance?
We might destroy the planet if it's Flashpoint.
Looking for something different in your podcast library? Then why not check out the Podcast Under the Stairs? I'm the host Duncan McLeish, and joining me each week will be a special guest as we examine some classic, old school horror favourites, as well as some modern classics. That's not to say that we don't tackle some of the, let's say, more questionable entries into the horror genre. And if all that wasn't enough, we have a subset of shows called Baz v Horror, where our horror novice, the Baz, tackles horror in all shapes and forms to see who will come out victorious. So what are you waiting for? The show can be found at podcastunderthestairs.wordpress.com and on Stitcher and iTunes. The Podcast Under the Stairs is a proud member of Legion Podcast Network. This is Duncan McLeish from Under the Stairs, signing off.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
All right, I guess we can move on to our movies now, and we're going to start with Django Kill, If You Live, Shoot, from 1967. directed by Giulio Questi, written by Franco Arcali, who is also known for doing the screenplay for Once Upon a Time in America. Giulio Questi, Maria del Carmen Martinez Roman, and Benedetto Benedetti are also credited for the writing here. And it stars Thomas Milan, who is someone we're going to come back to in this series, and he's a pretty well-known spaghetti western actor and Italian. Well, he's not Italian, actually. He's a Cubano. He is The Stranger, and some American films you might have seen him in are Traffic, JFK, and Havana. So he has had a little bit of a career over here as well. Also starring Mary Lou Tolo as Flory, Pero Louis as Opes, Milo Quesada as Bill Templar, Miguel Serrano as Indian, Francesco Sanz as Hagerman. We also have Angel Silva as one of the Indians, Sancho Garcia as Willie, Morella Pampilli as Woman in Town, Ray Lovelock, I think his first role, one of his first roles, as Evan, and Roberto Carmadil as Zorro, or Zorro, depending on what version of the film you watch. And Patrizia Valturi as Elizabeth Hagerman. And wow, that's probably the worst yet I've done for reading names. But it starts out like a traditional spaghetti western, I will say. Like it gives you that sort of initial plot. Thomas Milan is part of a group of bandits. He's basically hired help for these white bandits. They hire a bunch of Mexican laborers, and Thomas Milan is a half-breed. They basically ambush a Wells Fargo gold shipment, and then the white bandits turn on the Mexican bandits and shoot them all and bury them in a shallow grave, as you usually do with the Mexican help, right? And it's not really spelled out. Either he's brought back to life by these two wandering Indians, or he's just nursed back to health by these two wandering Indians. What was your interpretation of that, Daniel? Do you think there's a mystical element to this, or is he just sort of nursed back to health?
Not to jump ahead, but the gold bullets and the fact that in a later scene there's a dude shooting at him and missing completely. There's absolutely a supernatural element that's sort of implied by this.
Yeah, that's sort of what I got.
And one thing that I don't know that I expressed in the original Django podcast that we did was just that it does feel like Django as this kind of avenging angel, kind of like, laying waste onto like assholes everywhere sort of thing.
Yeah.
And kind of having that in mind, it was, like as this kind of general thing, whereas the first film, the Nero film, really has this sort of specific idea of Django as this kind of character, and kind of grounds him in realism, but kind of gives him that role. And then I saw this right after and went, my God, this is very much someone took that and then turned it up to 11 and made this explicit avenging angel kind of character. To me, I don't always want to like throw the supernatural in, but to me this was very easy to interpret as a supernatural kind of like, avenging angel kind of film.
Just for the record, in case you weren't listening to the last podcast, this isn't an actual Django film. This is one of those films that got retitled Django. I mean, This was retitled over the director Giulio Questi's head. They went over his head and retitled it on him, and he was not
even
a fan.
Even looking at the title card, I was kind of like, so it's Django Kill, and then underneath, if you live, shoot.
Yeah.
Which kind of implies that I didn't look up the history of it. It kind of means like the original title was If You Live, Shoot, and then Django Kill was like imposed upon it later on. Like it just seems that cheap.
Yeah.
And chintzy,
They did retitle it as Django Kill, If You Live, Shoot, strictly to get more sales, of course. I think the original working title was Oro Hondo or something along those lines, so it's like gold, whatever Hondo is. I don't know what the fuck that means. But and then there was another title as well that was in Spanish, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. No one else wants to hear me say any more Spanish in this episode, I don't think.
Yeah, probably for the best to not.
Yeah. But yeah, Questi was definitely not happy with the retitling, and Thomas Milan has even gone on record in interviews saying it was basically an insult to his movie to retitle it that. But it does sort of, as much as it's not a Django movie, it does sort of pick on that sort of element, like expands that idea of maybe this guy's supernatural, and it does kind of borrow just very barely kind of, again, from that sort of Yojimbo plot where the stranger walks into town and there's different factions. This time there's 3 different factions that he's sort of pinballing around between.
Well, it kind of starts out with factions. I mean, it does kind of like, it's interesting in the way that it reflects the original film, just in the sense of there are factions, and then like eventually towards the end, it kind of becomes this like almost personal drama, you know, between, you know, it really does turn into this guy, this preacher, who we at first think is like probably, you know, on the side of the angels, again with the kind of angel devil thing, and then kind of becomes, you know, then we kind of learn like, oh no, he's like abusive towards his wife and like doesn't deserve any, you know, sympathy at all, and he ends up being the major villain of the piece. I mean, there's almost this, and this is something I'll come back to in For the Apocalypse. There's this kind of bifurcated structure. You know, there's this. You kind of get the first half, and then that ends at a certain point, basically when the kid dies, and then you get to the second half. You know. Yeah. Man, I wish I had written a plot summary so that people who have not seen the movie know what I was talking about right now. So, you know.
Well, even then, I think going into this, you're going to be surprised because, like I said, it starts with the sort of standard spaghetti western kind of setup where the lone gunfighter going after his old gang who turned on him for revenge, like very, very standard kind of plot. But that ends very quickly. The gang that turned on him goes into this town, and this is the town that the 2 Indians who bring our stranger back to life say is the unhappy place. There's no word for it in their native language, and they don't know what the American word is. They just say, we call it the unhappy place. And the gang finds out really quick that it's the unhappy place because they get fucking slaughtered. The townspeople just they learn they have gold. We're gonna fucking kill them, and they do. Like, it goes fucking brutal really quick. One scene where a guy puts a gun up to his head and he pulls the trigger and it misfires, and you think, oh, take a breath of fresh air. He's not going to shoot him now. No, he just clicks again and shoots him this time, blows his head off.
I mean, that sequence is really, really violent, and I mean, honestly, like, completely unexpected within the structure of the film. The idea that they just go like, well, fuck these guys, and then hang them all. The stranger, who I'll probably reference as Django at some point because I'll forget not to call him the stranger, but the stranger, the pretty boy, he wants to go take him down. He wants to, you know, give him proper burials, and the townspeople are like, yo, fuck that shit. You know?
And once they learn that the stranger's been giving these golden bullets for his revenge he's supposed to take on the gang, and they dig some of these golden bullets out of the last gang member who's still alive at that point. And they very graphically do that as well.
It's very violent. I mean, there's a ton of like really interesting. I mean, you know, this kind of reflection on the way that the violence is reflected, you know, where we're kind of like looking at, you know, so often in you know, kind of the traditional Western, you know, a gun goes off and then it's like, and then the guy falls over. And the thing with the revisionist Westerns is they kind of made that much more explicit, and you kind of had to watch them twitch a little bit. And this is almost like going even extended to that, where like we're literally pulling these bullets out of these guys.
Yeah.
And then watch him die after we pull the bullets out, you know, which is, you know, it's still, you know, 1967, and it's still not, you know, graphic in a kind of modern horror movie sense or whatever. Yeah. But it's definitely affecting. I mean, it was very much on that, like, wow, that's a long way to go for a sequence like that, you know.
Yeah, for its time, it was very shocking, and I think that's one of the main points of this film. It does have a kind of a disjointed structure. It's edited in a very strange way. Like, you get these cut-ins of flashbacks. Sometimes they're upside down very, very quickly in. Like, sometimes you have like 2-3 second shots that just cut in and out. Giulio Questi was a rebel in Italy during World War II, fighting against the fascist government. And a lot of this, and this is the only Western he did, by the way, but a lot of the imagery he put in this was directly influenced by the sort of stuff he saw fighting the fascists in World War II. So a lot of the violence is kind of a reflection of that, like just how brutal and frank it is. I don't think he ever saw anyone have their bullets dug out of them quite in that way, you know.
Probably not gold bullets either, because I don't know that even gold bullets, it's too soft a metal. I don't know that that's a thing, but, you know.
Yeah. The imagery is sort of patterned after what he saw in World War II. Very thinly veiled and honestly not too strongly put into the actual plot and thrown in your face. The villagers in the town, or the townspeople, rather, kind of represent the sort of lazy populace that let the fascists sort of just move in and take over their government, essentially, is what he's sort of commenting on there. I mean, we'll talk about Mr. Sorrow here, or Zorro, depending on which version you see.
Sure.
He's very, very much depicted as this rich, spoiled, pampered fascist with his group of black shirts. In this case, a gang of homosexual cowboy rapists, all wearing black shirts.
So I watched the film, and maybe I didn't pay enough attention. I completely missed the gay subtext.
You did?
And then I was reading about it, and I was like, there was gay subtext in that? It may very well be that I was just like, I had a beer in my hand, and I just wasn't thinking about it on that level,
Okay, well, I'm fucking super surprised, because when you said, I'm going to love talking about this film, I thought, yeah, Daniel immediately saw the black shirts, and yeah, he's going to want to talk about that. Questy never really sort of spelled out what he was saying by that. Like, that's kind of the one point in everything he sort of puts in this film that it's not really quite spelled out what he was saying. I mean, back in the day, you're not going to find much positive depictions of gays.
No, not at all.
Back then. But I don't think he was necessarily going for, gays are evil or anything like that. Questy seemed kind of, like, in my opinion in this film, he seemed kind of really interested in just shocking the fuck out of everybody. Like, he's trying to make, like, the anti-Western here. So instead of having a gang of, like in any other Western, if there's any sort of implied rape at all, it's going to be a gang of heterosexual men raping a woman. And maybe like even an Indian woman or something along those lines, right?
Oh, don't worry. We're going to talk about rape when we get to the Apocalypse. So
yeah.
I will talk about rape shortly.
But I think he was just trying to shock people. Like he said in interviews, he was trying to kind of shock the sort of more American audience for Westerns, like try to throw everything on its head.
It's sort of a Western for people that hate Westerns. It's sort of it's using. I mean, I'll be honest. Watching this, I don't process it as a Western. I process it as this kind of supernatural ghost story that happens to be set in the Old West.
It's more of a gothic horror, isn't it?
Yeah, it very much. I mean, it really is. And then it kind of becomes a relationship drama. It becomes the story of the stranger and the kid who then dies. And then kind of becomes about like kind of approaching the preacher and kind of dealing with sorrow and it becomes kind of an interpersonal drama. I mean, there is this sense of where I did want to kind of rewatch it because I watched it once, and sometimes I'll watch these twice to kind of get a kind of second like view of it. But this was really one where I watched it once, and I was kind of like, I feel like there are buried levels to this. That there is some metaphor that I'm missing that he's like trying to get at. But I don't really care because for me, I found the interpersonal relationships compelling. I would like to talk about the women a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah,
we have 2 women in the film, of course. But like that's one more that I was expecting to have. So to a certain degree, it's like great, And at first, I didn't even realize there were 2 different characters. I thought there was some supernatural thing going on, and because you see the wife of the preacher kind of in the jail, and I thought it's some like magical mystical thing because I assumed there's only one woman in the film. So my apologies, but you've got Flory, who is kind of this really a villain character in her own way. I mean, she's seeking the gold, she's seeking this. She's seeking the wealth. She's in every way just as much a bastard as everybody else in the film.
Yeah.
And then later on, when we are kind of introduced to just the woman,
the woman in town, I think is
woman in town. Yeah. When we are introduced to her, there's this warmth that comes from that, and then you find out, she's married to this preacher who is locking her away, and just emotionally and probably physically abusive to her and all that sort of thing. So there really is this kind of like feminist reading of this that I think is fascinating.
Yeah, like the women in this both they almost kind of play Barbara Steele's performances in a lot of her films, like a lot of the horrors she did with Mario Bava and stuff in this period, where you had either the insane woman who was being persecuted in some way, or you have the scheming bitch who's trying to kill whoever gets in her way as long as she can get the money, the inheritance, whatever it is, right? So
hold on. Are we talking about a Madonna horror complex?
Yeah, exactly. Is basically what it is. So yeah, you've got Flory, who is actually pretty much done up like Barbara Steele would be, like the black hair and all that stuff. She's very, very scheming. And then, of course, you have the woman in town who is basically crazy. She's got the wild hair. She's locked up in her room. She's abused. And yeah, I was just watching this and I was like, that's right from a Mario Bava film. If I ever saw something from Mario Bava, I mean, it very much feels like a Barbara Steele picture at those points. And you can kind of look at it, if you sort of look at it through that lens, some of these characters start falling into place like they would in those films, because usually the villains in those films are aristocratic characters, and usually it's some lone stranger, some acquaintance of the family or something like that comes into the picture and is the sort of de facto hero, although a lot of those films end even worse than this film does for pretty much everybody, but that's sort of beside the point. Yeah, it has this really sort of influence of like gothic horror of the time from Italy that pretty prevalent. I mean, almost the spaghetti western trappings are almost just kind of fairly there, almost just kind of a sweet paint job on top of this like gothic horror.
Yeah, I mean, it really is it's just used as a setting. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, by the way, what I'm learning is we need to throw some Mario Bava on the list to watch. So.
Oh yeah.
I found the film really fascinating watching it, and then once it was kind of over, it kind of left my head a little bit, and kind of it was a kind of a once through. I would like to revisit it, but it didn't stick with me in the way that like maybe I would want a film like this to stick with me, and I think that's partly just it feels a little bit surface level. Even though the symbolism is there, it doesn't feel like I'm missing something by just kind of watching it once and enjoying it and letting it kind of pass by me, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's because none of the characters really grab me. And I think that's also, but I think that's the strength of the film, because it really is kind of playing on these archetypes and it's playing on this like supernatural element. Even if you interpret the film so that the stranger isn't a like supernatural being, it's definitely playing on some of these horror tropes. It's playing on those sorts of ideas, and that's very much not working on a detailed character-based level.
Honestly, Milan here as the lead, he's actually downplaying from what he usually does. Like he's a method actor. He can go pretty goddamn big when he wants to.
He's perfectly fine in the film. I mean, I enjoy him in the film. It feels like a very modernistic performance in a lot of ways, you know.
Yeah.
But it also feels like you say he's holding back. It does feel subdued. It feels like kind of slightly. I don't want to say he feels like he's slumming it, because that's not the impression. But it feels like he could do more, but he's not. You know, it feels.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
he feels a little bit like a pretty boy. And I'm sorry, the headband is distracting.
Well, if you took the headband away, he kind of looks like Han Solo before there was a Han Solo.
He does. I kept looking at him, and I kind of had this moment where I kept thinking of him as I don't know if you watched the TV show Psych.
No,
which is on the USA Network, but he kind of looks like the lead in Psych. It's not obvious, but just in terms of his mannerisms and kind of his attitude, it definitely was distracting enough to where I kind of felt like, you know, he's going to start like doing fake psychic powers for a while. You know? Like it kind of felt that way for me. And I hate that like that was my referent, but he's a little bit of a pretty boy, a modern actor. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the Apocalypse, because I have some definite things to say about the lead in that. But in terms of looks.
But yeah, I think the biggest performances here come from Oakes, who was the gang leader, and he's dead before the movie even gets halfway through, so that's immediately gone. And then the other one is Sorrow, and really he's only in a couple pieces, and most notably where he's talking to his fucking parrot, who...
I mean, Sorrow's kind of got the Lee Marvin role in this, right? You know, he's kind of got the kind of big, you know, like bold villain kind of thing. I mean, he's great. I really enjoy that performance. It's a great kind of villain performance. It just doesn't stick with me. But yeah, that's kind of...
But Daniel, if you only understood how much he appreciates his muchachos...
Fair enough.
Yeah, I should just mention that there are a couple pieces here that kind of show the cheapness of the film at the same time. Like some of the effects are really well done, and then sometimes you get these scenes that really take you out of it. The saloon singing sequence where she's obviously not singing that song at all, the dubbing is so bad, and the song sounds like something from a 40s nightclub that you would hear like in a noir or something like that, right? Like it doesn't feel period at all.
That to me, it almost like it doesn't sound like it's coming from her.
Yeah.
At all. Like it feels very different. I almost interpreted that as a tone piece, like the fact that it's kind of coming from noir, because I don't know if anybody noticed during our noir series, but I fucking love noir, So I almost interpreted that as a statement of tone, a statement of like this is the kind of thing we're going for, and so I think that noir and spaghetti western kind of fit together because they do have this darkness, this black comedy, and they also have this kind of like anybody is liable to die at any moment.
And you usually have the one man pitted against an impossible situation where everyone's against him.
Yeah. Multiple factions kind of playing against each other. And oh wait, are we eventually going to cover Bad Day at Black Rock, which is the ultimate,
mixing of western and noir?
Yeah.
We're definitely going to do
that.
No,
we'll never cover that. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. I would also mention the early on the little hat joke, even though this movie is mostly kind of just like really brutal and nasty throughout the most part. There's the little visual joke right at the beginning there where he goes in to kill Oakes and take his revenge on Oakes who's holed up in the store there, and it's a clothing store, and he's peeking up on the hat rack, and every time he peeks up, his head goes under one of the hats on the hat rack, so it looks like he's wearing a fucking hat.
Yeah, that's an amazing little sequence. I mean, and that's also kind of one of those, like, it's a visual joke, but it also feels very like Ghost Story, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, just looking at that sequence. I mean, that sequence where he's killing Oakes, where he ends up killing Oakes, where it feels like there's a supernatural element because kind of fading into the hats, and then he's standing there at point blank range, and the guy shoots him 4 times and misses, that sort of thing. Like, there's a definite supernatural interpretation of that I think is kind of unavoidable.
This is one of the scenes that kind of takes me out of it, and I kind of wish it was chopped from it. Like, I think one of the biggest problems of this film is it's way too long. Like, it could have used a half hour chopped out of it, I think.
This is an hour and 50 minutes long or something. At least 20 minutes can be cut out of this,
Yeah. Well, what did you... This is one of the sequences I kind of wish was cut out of it, but what did you think of the... where they take him back and they're torturing him, and they got him strung up like Jesus, and they're bringing, like, iguanas and vampire bats, supposedly, to torture him with, and some of these shots you can visibly see someone's fingers holding the animal in place so it doesn't run out of the shot.
I'm just sitting there. I was watching and I'm like, oh wait, was this Italy and was it 1967?
Yeah.
Like it's this very kind of avant-garde. I mean, I don't know, like that sort of thing doesn't bother me just because it's so weird and abstract that it just, like, I welcome it in almost any film, sort of thing. But I mean, there's very clearly this sense of like padding for time for those sorts of sequences. There's no reason to go to that regard. You could have just like hit him a couple of times and then faded to black and then kind of come up and just moved on with your story. It does feel long. It feels longer than it has to be, but I don't mind it. It's kind of like, okay, yeah. I kind of like to luxuriating in the world that the film had a little bit. That's kind of my big picture opinion on the length. But definitely, if you're doing a spaghetti western and you're longer than like an hour and 40 minutes, you got to be Sergio Leone. That's kind of
pretty much.
It's got to be either 90 minutes or 150 minutes. It's one or the other. Like you can't do anything in between, or else fuck off.
Yeah, I think where I fall in that scene, as much as I didn't like it, I'm just happy to see an Italian film where animals weren't murdered on screen for real. That's always refreshing.
Yeah, I get that.
So this film is
again going to For the Apocalypse. There's a moment of that, So.
Yeah. So the box office for this was 14 million in Spain, 14.5 million. So it actually did very well, but it started off on shaky grounds. There's several cuts of this out there. This film was confiscated after the first week by the Italian court and edited down by 22 minutes and then re-released because they felt that the movie was too shocking and it would lead to people becoming violent and, because, if you watch the movie... They
didn't cut the 22 minutes that we might cut. They cut a good 22 minutes.
Yeah. Also, it was chopped down for the UK by 90 minutes. Or down to 90 minutes, not by 90 minutes. Jesus Christ.
I was like, so there's like a 55-minute cut of this film out there.
But, yeah, it was later restored, of course. This was a very chopped-apart film at its time, and Questi sort of had a reputation at the time going as being kind of a shocking filmmaker. He started in documentaries before he moved to feature films, and he did some experimental kind of surrealist stuff that you can kind of see starting off here in this film. So Alex Cox, who is probably best known for doing Repo Man, remade this film in 1986 and called it Straight to Hell, which I kind of want to see now. I've never seen that one. So
we need to put that on our list and watch it, because director of Repo Man remade this film. As fascinating as that is, I don't care. We'll do that.
The soundtrack was done by Ivan Vandor. Good luck finding it anywhere. I don't think it was actually officially released, but I did find a copy of it for the podcast. But that opening song, even the opening song is kind of off. Tonally, it's kind of off. Some of the chord progressions go a little too long. Where they stick it in the film kind of comes in weird places sometimes, where they repeat the theme.
I mean, the film, I enjoyed the film, but it kind of feels like a first draft, kind of amateur effort a little bit.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit kind of like people who didn't quite know how to do what they were doing were doing this. And I think that's kind of one of the strengths of the film, is that it doesn't get in its own way. It kind of just is what it is.
Yeah.
As much as I enjoy the film, it doesn't feel like really a quite fully professional effort.
Yeah. You want to get this on DVD or Blu-ray? Blue Underground released the DVD in 2004 and Blu-ray version in 2012. Those are probably your best options. It's probably on Amazon Prime or something too, is it? Do you know?
Yep. That's how I watched it, because for some obscure reason, I'm still an Amazon Prime member. They bill me once a year, and then I go, fuck, I forgot to cancel that. And then I have access to all the Amazon Prime stuff for the year. That's how they get you, because they only bill you once a year. This was on Amazon Prime. It's a beautiful print. Both this and For the Apocalypse are on Amazon Prime. They both look gorgeous, and they both have subtitles, which is something that I definitely recommend for watching these.
Nice
to watch them with subtitles.
Okay, so I think we both agree, though. This is worth seeing. Like, this has kind of had a reputation of being like one of those kind of the one spaghetti western that you never heard about that you got to see, because it's kind of shocking and definitely very original of its genre. And I agree with that. I think some people are going to probably be put off by the length and maybe the lack of sort of hard narrative, but I think it's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're a film nerd. It's just an experience.
As someone who isn't a huge horror fan, I think it's most interesting for its horror elements.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's for me. That's the, like, it's not for me. It's not like I watch this as a Western fan or as a film fan and go, "Oh, this is a must see." For me, it's for the kind of combination of the Western genre with the horror elements that makes it interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then the kind of second half, there's some really interesting kind of character dynamics kind of going on. But this is, it's worth seeing. I kind of say this all the time. If what we've said sounds interesting, it's probably worth watching. But I don't know that I would say. I don't know that I would recommend this to people, like as a spaghetti western.
I definitely wouldn't say, "Oh, you want to see spaghetti westerns? Here's the first one you should watch."
Right. This is a little bit of a deep cut.
Yeah. This is after you've watched all the Leone stuff and all the Corbucci stuff,
or even like just as a casual, like kind of a film fan, as a movie. I don't even know that I would recommend this. Like, oh, you're a cinema fan, you should check this out. It's a little bit kind of off to the side, of that. It feels like a very particular kind of pleasure. It feels like something that I would really recommend only to people that I felt like really were gonna like get something out of this. Like, I got something out of this, but it didn't feel like it doesn't feel necessary. If you are interested in kind of supernatural interpretations of the Western, that's the people that I think really should watch this. So
yeah. Agreed. All right, Paul's here. How you doing, sir?
Hi, I'm ready to go. Let's do this and kick some ass.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually at least made it for the Fulci.
Well, the 3 of Purgatory can do the 4 of the Apocalypse now.
Yeah, and since you're here now as well, there was a question posed for Movie God.
Movie God.
By Jack Graham, and he gives you. We already answered this one ourselves, but he gives this question. You have to pick between 2 people. One of them you have to eliminate. Would you eliminate Ray Harryhausen or Jim Henson?
I guess I don't know. Fuck it. I can't live without Fraggles. Harryhausen. I'm killing the Harryhausen. I mean, I'm not thinking about... I just woke up. I can't think about this too hard. But no, it's I think... What is it? Henson's actually been in a couple different... Has his hand in a couple actual things that I remember really enjoying growing up. And it wasn't just like Fraggles and shit. So, I'll kill Henson. Why the hell not? Everybody... Harryhausen. But do you guys... part of me is assuming... He didn't fare too well when you guys picked?
I picked to keep Harryhausen, and Daniel picked Henson to keep.
Henson's the winner! 2-1, baby. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, Harry.
I really love that logic of I love the fucking Fraggles, so fuck Harryhausen. That's almost precisely the logic I use, although it wasn't the Fraggles, although I grew up with the Fraggles, but it was very much like Henson means more, so fuck Harryhausen.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I don't know, the Fraggle Rock was like the first show with a black metal logo. That cryptic kind of like, I'm like, whoa, look at that. Oh yeah, but no, definitely the Fraggles is just something I don't think I could do without.
I'll restate this just for you, Paul. The listeners have already heard this, but my wife fucking loves Jim Henson and the Fraggles and everything, and so like there was no realistic way I was killing Jim Henson. Like it just wasn't.
I cannot do this. This is not happening today. It's one of those deals.
Just because I love my wife, I have to keep the Fraggles. Like I have to keep them.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. I guess we can move on to the next film then. We're going to be talking about For the Apocalypse from 1975.
Make up your mind. All your fools outside the store. Now don't you know what's going on here? So many friends, little baby will be born.
They were 4 outcasts with a single purpose: survival. Stubby Preston, professional card sharp. Clem, the drunk. Bunny, a cheap prostitute. And Butt, the crazy.
They're gonna get us next summer. They're gonna get us!
You got any objections, Clem?
It's okay with me. I don't even remember my own name.
Murder? Rape? Robbery? Or all 3 of them?
I'm a friend of all the dead people. I see them all the time. Sometimes in the nighttime, and sometimes in the daytime.
As they headed toward the west, spurred on by the promise of freedom, their trail crosses with that of another outcast, Chaco, a professional killer.
You see how Chaco shoots?
So let us pray together now.
Stubby, a fancy dresser and polite as you please, finds himself torn between the will to survive and revenge.
This is the second time, I swear it.
Someday I'm gonna kill you!
Clem, his fool's paradise became a hell. Bunny, she discovered love for the first time, but fate was to cheat her of her happiness.
Stubby, I love you.
Stubby! Look over there, Stubby!
But he lived in a world of dreams that became a nightmare.
Sheriff Taylor died by a cleft skull, one of his own horses.
I could kill you right now, but I won't, because I want you to die slowly.
So let us pray together now. Yes, let us pray together now.
You can't ever tell. Take it. If you don't need it, keep it as a souvenir.
Directed by Lucio Fulci, written by Ennio Di Concini, based on stories by Bret Hart, not the pro wrestler, by the way. Two of his stories, The Luck of Roaring Camp and The Outcasts of Poker Flat. This is starring Fabio Testi, who is also a very well-known Italian actor. He's probably, if to say that Franco Nero was sort of the George Clooney of his day, Fabio Testi's kind of the Brad Pitt of his day, sort of. Lynn Frederick as Emmanuel Bunny O'Neill. Michael J. Pollard as Clem, who's a very famous character actor. You'll have seen this guy in something, guaranteed. You'll know his face. Harry Baird as Bud. Adolfo Lazzaretti as Reverend Sullivan. Bruno Corazzari as Lemmy. Fuck the rest of them, I don't care.
No, you're doing it, damn it.
No, Thomas Milan is Chacho, and that's it. There's no other cast members. This is an interesting one. I think this was Fulci's first foray into spaghetti westerns. He did like one or two of them. I think this is his first foray into that. And this is actually kind of his first foray into like really gory violence as well. Like before then, he really didn't go into that. This sort of set the motifs for his horror movies that he would be later known for. And this is about a group of different outlaws, drifters, who are brought together after the town they are all staying in decides to get uppity. I guess they're kind of coded as Mormons, although they don't specifically say, but it's set in Utah, so you can kind of think, Mormons. And basically they get tired of the debauchery and gambling in their town. So over one night they tell the sheriff to look the other fucking way. Anyone in the jail gets spared, but anyone else outside in the streets gets killed. So they basically rise up and murder all the ne'er-do-wells in town. And then the next day, our four heroes are released and sent packing on their way in a wagon. And they go through the desert, 200-mile desert they're going across, apparently. They run into, unfortunately for them, Thomas Milan's character as Chacho, and he leads them down a path of depravity and violence and hallucinations. And yeah, that's kind of all you really need to know as a sort of a basic synopsis of this. Paul, since you jumped in here, what are your sort of initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I don't know. This one was weird because it really it gave you a lot of time, unlike, let's say, Django, to really sink into other characters more so than just the star, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. But I love the beginning of the film. I mean, the film it doesn't waste your time. The film just kicks right into it, and it gives you a surreal feeling as the sheriff just eats his supper, and it's he's not exceedingly happy about it. You can kind of tell he's half pissed off when he's doing it, but he's just eating his thing. He's like, this. Okay, I'm trying not to realize that people are getting completely murdered outside, but we're good. And at the beginning of the film, in the town cleaning the flotsam and jetsam is a great part of the film. I was like, oh, I can't believe I haven't watched this film before. Once that was going on, I was actually surprised because they were freaking out in the jail cell, and I don't actually remember him saying like, you better shut up because the only reason you're living right now is because of me. So just pipe down. His silence in the film, while he was eating and just stuff, while all the chaos was going off and they were freaking out in the jail, that was pretty deep. It's pretty good. Yeah. Overall, the film is very effective, and the baby-faced lead is just definitely something. Yeah, I was not expecting that at first. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, okay, that's different. He is a beautiful man, as you said about Franco. There you go.
Yeah. Daniel, your sort of initial thoughts on this?
I really found myself responding to this film. It's hugely episodic. Again, bifurcated. You can kind of tell, like, oh, this is 2 short stories that it kind of get bonded into 2. But it's also this, it's more complex than that because they have kind of layered in this Chaco's kind of story across the 2. And there are kind of other meetings and other kind of places they go, so it doesn't feel quite as obvious. If I didn't know it was built out around 2 short stories, I wouldn't have necessarily connected it with that. I really love this film. I will definitely be revisiting this, looking towards the best of the year kind of list. Not hugely complex, but I really love. I think for me, what drew me to it was, you tell me the title. I mean, so. Behind the scenes moment here. Lee kind of gives me a list of titles sometimes, and I just kind of look it up and watch it. Like I don't have any and so for me and then I knew it was Fulci. So for me, I'm like, For the Apocalypse. That's going to be about some like Western town that's invaded by 4 horsemen of the apocalypse sort of thing. Like that's what this story is going to be, from the title and from the like the kind of the priestess. And it's not that at all. What it is 4 people kind of in the wilderness, which is kind of this post-apocalyptic world in a very real way, where you're without the kind of vestiges of civilization. And so much about the Western as a genre is about this kind of conflict between kind of the frontier and about like quote-unquote civilization and what is meaningful and what do people actually do. And this film confronts that really directly. And really in this very overt way, which I found really fascinating. They get picked off one by one as the film goes on. And the way that happens, I think, is also really interesting because it is kind of about who these people are versus something that's kind of done to them. There's no like kind of sense of outside violence. It's very much about like the decisions they make lead to their ends in some really interesting ways. The violence works for me. The blood, the gore. I really liked the goriness of this. I really, particularly when you get to the kind of cannibalism sequence, which is not, it's Fulci, so it wasn't unexpected for me. Like, oh yeah, no, clearly, dude comes back, he's like, look, I got a big piece of meat. Oh yeah, you just killed it. You were eating that guy. There's no question for that for me. It goes to some really dark places. I definitely want to talk about the rape because I think that's a really interesting element in the film.
Yeah, talk slowly about it. I've been silent for too damn long. Go for it.
I mean, I'll talk about it later. But overall, I really liked the film. I think it's fascinating, and I'm definitely going to be revisiting it before the end of the year. So, apologies. I know I kind of talked a lot. I have a lot to say.
No, good, because I don't.
The film, so
Yeah, this is like I said, it is kind of episodic in a way, like because. Essentially, it is made from 2 short stories, but it feels like there's maybe several little short stories here because you get the initial, they're run out of town. They run into this traveling convoy of Christians from, I guess, immigrated from Switzerland, was it? Or Sweden? Or one
Sweden.
of those? Yeah,
I think Sweden.
Yeah. So they run into them, and that's where Fabio Testi and Lynn Frederick first sort of lie about being married just to avoid any sort of complications along the way, between what are you 2 young people doing wandering around together if you ain't married,
Oh, we're married, clearly,
Yeah.
Obviously.
And in a way, they over the course of the film, they really do sort of become married in a sort of in a way anyway, in essence. So they hit the Christian missionaries or whatever they are. Then they run into Chacho. And they quickly learn, although at first he seems like, although he's kind of shifty, he's, useful. They quickly learn what he's all about. And he leaves them to die in the desert. And they basically, the rest of their journey is getting out of the desert and them all sort of dying off as they do. Until the final kind of conflict between Testi and Chacho, Thomas Milan's character. Fulci, it's kind of weird because going into this, like knowing Fulci's other films where he doesn't really focus on story and character all that much, where he's much more about the visuals and about shocking you with things. Kind of turns it on its head here. Like you're kind of thrown off, saying, "Wow, he's actually paying attention to character development here. He's actually interested in the relationship between these characters. He's got excellent fucking actors portraying these characters."
I mean, he could have hired Bob for something, but
yeah, Michael J. Pollard is fucking amazing in this film. Like, I would argue that the film actually kind of drops off in quality quite a bit after he dies in this film. Once his character leaves, I mean, everyone else is still pretty good in this, but for me, he had the best performance as this just the most likable, deplorable drunk you can think of.
Well,
like
the deplorable drunk in a Western. I mean, that dates back. I mean, that was a cliche when Ford made Stagecoach. You know, in '39, that was already a cliche. And this guy could have very easily been just another line of Western drunks, and yet is completely humanized within the film. And I think that that's what keeps drawing me, keeps me interested in this film, is how human and how social and how it really is built on these kind of character relationships. And in a way that we don't think of Fulci, and we think, oh, look at the dynamics of the characters here. I mean, this seems uncharacteristic for Fulci, and I wonder, I mean, what I really want to do is go and read the short stories and see how much of this is in the short stories, because I did not dig into that, because I definitely, as soon as I started watching this, I'm like, holy fuck, I want to read these short stories and see what was.
I'm just guessing here, but I'm guessing in neither of these stories does it involve someone having his buttocks removed to be eaten.
There are certainly elements that feel very Fulci. There are certainly elements where it's like, oh yeah, no, that was not the original.
Yeah.
Although, maybe Fulci saw that and went like, and now I'm going to make a career out of this.
Yeah, I mean, Fulci could have been like, well, that time, that place, Donner Party, eating people, throw it in.
Yeah, that's very much what I was kind of getting out of it. Like,
Manifest Destiny with some human chicken fingers added too.
Yeah, well, I mean, Chacho leaves these guys with nothing. Like, he just leaves them to die in the desert, and it's only through their determination and the friendship that they kind of build, like in their little loosely thrown together gang, that they manage to even make it out of the desert in some sort of semblance of of alive. So, I mean, the fact that it resorts to cannibalism isn't surprising. It's actually kind of expected in a way.
Well, I mean, for me, it connects to like the zombie movie thing. Like it's hard to not kind of say like, look, I almost connect this to The Road, which I never saw the movie, but I read the book.
Part of it was filmed in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Good movie.
Yeah, it connects me to that, to the kind of, like, you think about how dark that book is, and you think about how, we got these roving bands of cannibals, we got all this kind of stuff, we've got, like, basically this, like, slow kind of torturers. And I think it does connect to this idea of the apocalypse, to this, like, kind of post-nuclear winter thing. I mean, it's hard for me not to see this as, even though it's set in the Old West, it's not really set in the Old West, It's about this sort of, like, what do we do when the bonds of civilization have left us? And we are left in this situation where all we have is each other in this tiny band.
Well, this could be set anywhere, as you were saying, this idea. And it has been in other films, obviously. Other films have approached this. I mean, even with more, technically speaking, the flesh, and the devil.
The War of the Flesh and the Devil.
The War of the Flesh and the Devil. Same kind of concept. What happens when it's just us, and how do we rebuild? That kind of
What
idea.
happens when people stop being fake and start being real?
The real world.
The real world, 1873. That's what.
I just remember that, her screaming, "Can you pick up the phone?" from that commercial. But we've seen it before. I mean, even in more traditional cheesy titles, Last Woman on Earth or Last Man on Earth, and this and that. But it's interesting what happens when you get forced to be in that situation and rebuild. And then obviously, the line I said before is, someone's stuck in the middle, and no matter where they run, they can't end up getting shit on their shoes. So, I mean, they're in a bad spot.
I mean, it's very much that sort of. I mean, again, both of these films, and I really appreciate, Lee, you kind of recommending we do this together. But neither of these really feel like a Western to me. You know, they feel. I mean, even though they're kind of set in the setting.
Mm-hmm.
Tonally, this is very much. I mean, it's kind of part soap opera because it's got the relationship kind of going on and the kind of romance building, which is almost a romance a necessity, and it's almost like you kind of the actors sell it definitely. Like, I'm not trying to like belittle that. I actually really like the relationship that builds between these two. I think they're charming as fuck from the first time they talk to each other. Personally, I think there's some really interesting dynamics going on. But you see kind of that going on. You see they kind of join this little community. There are 4 of them. They're on the wagon, and they lose the wagon. They meet up with Chaco, who ends up being a total douchebag. There's the torture scene, which, you know, is amazing because, like, it really feels like you don't know what's going to happen. Like, for me, I'm kind of like, you know, without any knowledge of what's happening in this film, anything could happen from that point forward, which I think is one of the triumphs of the film. Once you kind of get past that, and then, like, you kind of think, oh, it's going to kind of become this revenge picture, and then it's not. I mean, it kind of eventually becomes that, but not really. It's really kind of about they're just trying to survive, and the fact that they're trying to survive in this like hellhole environment, that's what makes it feel like this kind of post-apocalyptic movie, and the title just sells it to that. Like, I can't imagine that they weren't thinking of nuclear winter at some point while they were making this film. It's an incredibly rich film, thematically, visually, performance-wise, the writing. I mean, it's a little bit of a mess. I mean, you know, when we get to the miners' camp and you get to, you know, there's this group of miners, and they're basically like, yeah, we're just here, we're just going to mine, we're going to do our thing, we don't really give a shit about anything. And then suddenly there's this woman and there's this baby that's being born, and they kind of come together. The baby being born is what forces them to form a community there.
Yeah,
and
I mean, that was
really
tense. That was a tense moment. I didn't know what was going on when I watched it at first with the miners' camp. The miners' camp actually gave me more tension than the torture scene.
I thought they were going to do something too, because I mean, initially you get some of the key characters that they show there talking about how they were, you know, they had a bunch of like bad relationships with women and stuff, and they spurned them, and yeah, we're all a bunch of men hanging out in this miners' camp, and we don't let other people in here, we don't let women in here especially, and then
basically these guys are Reddit, like, you know.
But yeah, and then they actually, you know, the woman and her plight and the birth of the child kind of melts their hearts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, don't just because they're all dressed in almost like, you know, all these crazy ass black dirty coal mining hides and all this stuff, and they actually kind of look pretty intimidating, all rough and tumbly, and they actually look like a bunch of bad dudes. I didn't know what they were going to do at first, and then it turns out they're all decent guys, and like they took on one of the biggest challenges in the world by the end of the movie for Stubby. You know, that's pretty crazy. And they're all involved. They all wanted to give gifts and check out the baby, and they're all happy. It's like, this is crazy. I love this.
They're like betting. I mean, there is this long sequence where they're betting on, like, oh, is it a boy or a girl? Is it, you know, like all that sort of. They've got all these kind of details. Oh, it'll cry in the first 10 minutes, or, you know, whatever. Like, I don't remember all the details, but and then like once the baby's born and the mother dies, they just completely, like, they don't care anymore. They're just like, yeah, just take it, like it's for the kid. And that's how societies are born, where we bond together over a common good. And I don't want to say it's profound, because it's not like they'll look at how amazing an insight that is. But for a film like this, you know, for a film directed by Lucio Fulci,
there is a neat contrast there between that community and the community depicted at the beginning of the film that kills all the ne'er-do-wells in the town.
Yeah.
Their answer to the common good in society is to murder all the people they don't like. In the miners' camp, it's no, we come around and support the weaker and the unprotected, and, you know, build a community in that regards instead.
The religious conservative assholes, they're like, you know, they're very concerned with their image, and they're, you know, like, oh, we don't want a card sharp in our town, we don't want whores in our town, like, get the fuck out. And, you know, it is like, I mean, I'm an atheist. I know, Lee, you're an atheist, but the Christian message is, you know, like, all are welcome in Christ's tent, you know, sort of thing. And I think that there is this sense of, like, these miners are behaving more in this Christ-like way than anyone who would attempt to.
Well, they're in the miners. You hear them talk about, some of them talk about their past. They're actually, I mean, if you look at this in a religious tone, and it's interesting too because Fulci was also an atheist. But the miners are confessed sinners. Like, they are confessed sinners who are still putting this child's welfare before their own vices.
It's all about empathy, right? Like, I mean, and the whole film kind of keeps coming back to that. I mean, you have this long sequence where they're even after our African American friend kind of goes off and kind of goes off the deep end. Our two leads are still like really empathetic towards him. Oh, he will be happier here with his delusions, and he won't hurt anybody, and he'll have food to eat and all that sort of thing. They're still very supportive of that. They're still empathetic to that, even though they don't want to be around him anymore for obvious reasons.
It was, they didn't have the hunt him with sticks moment. They were like, you know what, we're good, he's good, let's move on. Let's do this. There's this idea of like lifeboat rules that you see from so many people, like, there are 4 people on a lifeboat and not all of us can live, and so therefore, you make this authoritarian impulse and then somebody has to die and all that sort of thing, This isn't the Highlander.
This isn't that. This is the way people actually respond to that, where we all pull resources, we all want to eat, we all want to sleep, we all want to be warm, and it's it's so humanistic.
Well, it's the basis. It's actually the basis of communalism.
Yeah,
it's building societies. That's
it's you and me and the other guy and all the other people, and even though we may disagree on certain things, we all need to eat and we all want to be warm. If we work together, we will all do that. That's how we build civilization, ultimately.
Yeah, don't get in each other's way. Don't hurt the other guy. As long as no one's hurting anyone else, and why can't you get along? Exactly.
Yeah, and this film, I mean, it feels explicitly about that. I mean, I don't want to get. I mean, I know that I have a reputation for getting over intellectual about these things, and I don't.
Never happened once.
I think Fulci is honestly trying to do this. I think this is legitimately what this film is trying to say, and I think that I want to resist saying it's profound, but I think it is kind of profound. I think it is really, like, within this genre, it's doing something really, really interesting and really, really putting that out there as this thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, this reminds me of the best parts of Deadwood. I know you haven't seen Deadwood, Lee, but Deadwood is all about this. This idea of building communities where none would exist before, and this film isn't as sophisticated as Deadwood, but it's it's also
it doesn't have seasons to go through.
It's also 5% of the length, so but it's absolutely exploring some of the same ideas, and it's really worth watching. If you haven't seen this, it's worth it, definitely.
Yeah. Although all this great stuff we're pulling from it, and then let's go back to the reality of this fucking soundtrack for this film, because my God, is it terrible.
Well, yeah.
This is the tail end of the spaghetti western genre, essentially, and you were sort of moving away from the standard kind of spaghetti western soundtracks, and you couldn't move farther away than what they have here, pretty much. I
would kind of like Morricone before he dies to write a score for this.
Yeah, because this is
like just before he dies to go. Okay, I'm gonna write a score for For the Apocalypse to throw on there to make For the Apocalypse the masterpiece it should be.
Because the soundtrack's done by Greenfield and Cook and Benjamin Franklin Group, apparently. And
it sounds like a law office.
Yeah, really?
No,
doesn't it?
Doesn't sound like that. Pretty good.
But my God, it's terrible. It sounds like the worst kind of derivative Mamas and the Papas kind of stuff. Like it sounds like the really weak sauce version of the sort of country rock stuff we were listening to in the Crown International Pictures films for those beach party movies and stuff. It doesn't fit at all. Like I don't know.
I'm reminded slightly. I don't know. It's been a while since I've mentioned William Goldman on this podcast, so I might as well do it today, right?
Yeah.
In Adventures of the Screen Trade, there is the full-length script of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which, by the way, we should definitely cover on this podcast at some point. Just throwing that out there. Goldman mentions, and this screenplay was written in 1968, he mentions that a bunch of the kind of folk rocky stuff that was popular in 68 was pretty reminiscent of the stuff that was kind of popular in the 19th century, you know. And I kind of responded to it as, you know, this is 75, and they're kind of doing this slightly poppy, kind of pop rocky, folk guitar-y kind of thing, which feels very current, or at least not current for 1975, which I mean, it feels like this kind of, like, it doesn't feel very spaghetti western in the sense of it doesn't feel like Bacalov, or it doesn't feel like Morricone. I mean, it was distracting to the degree that it was kind of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what are you trying to say? Yeah. But, like, it didn't pull me out of the movie.
Well, they just had a new commercial I just saw, kind of somewhat similar kind of a style. They're remaking Magnificent Seven. Mm-hmm. And I love Magnificent Seven. I'm not happy about the remake. But during the whole remake, it was a rap song about the Magnificent Seven playing over the commercial. And you know what?
So Paul, I'm just gonna.
About it.
So Paul, you realize that the Magnificent Seven is itself a remake, right?
It is a remake of Seven Samurai. I know that, but it wasn't really a western, if you know what I mean.
Well,
but so I don't know. Like, okay, so what kind of music are you going to set in this film, or is that just the theme song at the end when the credits play? You know, I'm like, how are they going to do that? Because that's very contrasting too, just like this film. Like, that style of music isn't going to be conducive to a nice Western vibe. I don't know.
Well, here's the weird thing: the music from Four of the Apocalypse. You know, it sounds very current to me in that it's a movie from the 70s. It sounds very much like a lot of these sort of biker exploitation horror films of the time. They would have kind of soundtracks like that where, you know, they weren't even thinking about trying to score it to any sort of degree. They're just like, what kind of cheap pop rock stuff can we get that the kids going to the drive-ins would, you know, listen to at that point.
Right.
So it feels like that. It feels like a bunch of Italians who actually didn't know the American market all that well, and they just.
It really what you're saying is it's capitalism run wild. It really is. Like, all we really care about is our immediate, you know, the kids will like it.
The kids will like it, don't worry. I like it. I can't even really remember the fucking music, if I'm honest.
Well, for me, I'm with Paul on this. By the way, that's the last time you'll ever hear me say the final.
Wow!
Wow!
I would follow this because I completely forgot the score until Lee mentioned it, and I'm like, what? What's going on with the score? And then he started talking about it. I'm like, oh right, but like I kind of responded to it in this kind of vaguely positive, kind of 60-40 kind of way. Like, yeah, well, you know, it's not Morricone, so fuck you. But like, you know, as a movie score, I didn't mind it as much. You know.
So apparently, it only bothered me a lot. Moving on.
It's only because you don't know how to read film, Lee, and you have no understanding of cinema. And so that's it.
See, the thing is, my problem is that you don't really hear the music when the fast forward button is pressed. The music shuts off.
That would be a problem, yes.
That's why I didn't get it. Or you and I could have had hour-long discussion, but I'm sorry. That just didn't work.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Thomas Milan here and his Manson-like character of Chacho. Pretty interesting performance. We were talking about in the previous film how he's very subdued. In this performance, his method acting is pretty goddamn great, and he's very menacing and convincing as this murderous, rapist piece of shit who is almost who would be a cult leader. I mean, if he had the chance to build enough followers and keep them alive long enough. Yeah, because he gives them all peyote. Peyote
buttons. Yeah,
and Testy has the wherewithal to spit it out, and probably in a way to his detriment, because he gets to witness all the horrible things that Milan ends up doing while they're all subdued by the drugs and the ropes he tied around them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what did you guys think of his performance and his character in this?
I don't know. He was. I always thought like he came in and gave that bad guy Western realism to the film, where a lot of times when you were looking for the Western kind of motifs, they usually fell a little bit short in this film. So he actually gave a lot of that credibility of the bad guy in the Western, even though his group has to be the tiniest bad guy group I've ever seen in a Western. They're all bad dudes and they do bad things, and some of the shit they do is pretty nerve-wracking to the bone when you see the the way they shot the carnage of the Swedish camp and stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I get the feeling that his character is kind of this chaotic kind of personality where he can never necessarily keep a group for long. Like he'll grab a bunch of people with his personality and his force of will, and then he'll use them for one job or whatever he's going to do for kicks, and then he kills them and moves on. I think that's kind of what his sort of modus operandi is. So,
well, they never actually got a chance to show them eating the smorgasbord that fucking Chacho like just automatically found in the desert. I'm like, okay, how many people are you trying to feed right now? Because you're doing a pretty goddamn good job.
They killed every duck in the countryside in that.
Yeah,
one
I was
sequence.
gonna say that has to be like 300-mile radius worth of animals in that fucking desert they just shot in that scene. I was like, wow, this is pretty. It just keeps going. It just keeps going. Wow, this is the most bountiful desert I've ever seen in a film. Pretty awesome. Pretty soon you're just going to see zebras coming through and elk and everything. It's just to get bigger and bigger and better.
Yeah. What are your thoughts there, Daniel?
Chacho is he's a kind of fascinating figure in the sense of, like, he's this charismatic leader, but at the same time ends up being murderous and abusive and fucking rapist. I think he's just using, he's basically a classic sociopath. You know, he's this... Really what he does is he justifies the kind of second half of the film, where his evil sets towards the protagonists justifies the kind of ending of the film. But in a way, it's kind of like, he's kind of the direction. He's sort of the signpost. Like, he's how we know the film ends, because once he dies, the film is over. The film itself isn't really interested in him. Like, once he's not on screen, it's much more interested in the community, those kind of aspects. And so there is this kind of paradox. There is this kind of a question of, like, what are we really examining here? Because we're examining both this kind of idea of this community being built and the child being born and the minors and that sort of thing. But really what that does is it allows our protagonist to then go and, like, take his revenge. So it is kind of like two different stories that have kind of been combined into one movie.
Well, no matter what you're building, you always get dragged back in sometimes into the rough life. You know, that kind of thing too.
Well, really, what he does is once the woman dies, once the mother dies, that's really the thing that, like, drives him to go back and kill the guy. You know, which really tells you what he values as a character, as a human being. And that is, he was kind of, I don't want to say he's, like, perfectly willing to kind of let bygones be bygones, but he's certainly, like, focused on his own community and his own, like, the adopted child sort of thing. And then once she dies, once he doesn't have her in his life anymore, he's like, well, fuck that shit, I now have to go kill this guy.
Yeah. He's rational. He's like, why would I go do this? I'll probably end up dead anyway. Who gives a fuck? We're all good. We'll just move on. And then when she dies, she goes, you know what? No, we're going to do this. We're doing this right now. But the funny thing is, I'm going to leave the child with a group of minors. And then, Yeah. Well, the actual Chaco, his character gives me a little bit of the meat that I need for the Western. But at the same time, I'm going to contradict myself, because the end of the film, it failed as the end of a classic Western film to me again. It goes back and it takes what you expect and it gives you something different. The anticlimactic end to Chaco's death was something that I did not expect. I didn't expect a simple, gut shot, roll around in the hay kind of an ending. You don't get the classic shootout. You don't get that classic kind of feel.
Well, it's very much.
And Chaco actually wins in the end, if you look at it, because you don't get this stern-faced hero either, because you can see Stubby break down and just fucking unload his gun in the Chaco at the end. Seeing that Chaco still got to him in the end. what he said to his, he's not stoic. He's not stone-faced, bad.
There's no hero here. There's no sense of this guy is doing something right for his community. This guy is taking revenge.
Yeah.
And he's doing this because he wants to. Like it's totally individually based, you know.
The shaving scene was great, though. I love that.
It's this amazing. It's this amazing sequence where it feels like I mean, basically I've tripled this guy, and therefore I'm going to completely ignore him and just shave my face because like I can, and he knows where this is going. Like he knows what's really happening here, and I kind of like the fact that he just murders the guy in cold blood. I mean, yes, it violates the Western, but it just as what we were saying with the earlier film. It reflects this idea of like we're going to challenge all the conventions of the Western. We're going to suddenly communicate this, like how brutal this really is. High noon is great, but high noon is not how people actually lived in 1875. This is much more what life is cheap meant, where you're dead and you're just going to get like pushed off in a corner somewhere, and that's that, you know. And this is what that means. I really appreciated that. I really appreciated that we get this kind of moral complexity from this guy, you know.
Yeah.
That we want Chaco dead because he's a fucking shithead. I mean, he's a rapist and a murderer and all that sort of thing. But it's not like he's being killed by a court process that is like fair and impartial. He's being killed by one of his victims because his victim said, like, fuck, I can do this. Done.
I mean, Chaco's group did. I mean, you don't usually see too many child deaths in films, but like, and they laid Clem right next to the dead girl on the road, and he's fucking half insane and half, hurt because of his leg shot. And you got visuals in these films you don't usually see in other films. Like, they don't usually go there. This one went there. It went for, like you said, gritty reality, shit sucks, and that's it.
Yeah.
Even when Clem was just unceremoniously laid out with his ass gone. Just that realism, when especially when Bud goes insane. I always thought it was funny when I watched that part because the mice didn't taste very good. But Clem turned out to be pretty good. It also reminded me of the true story of the Donner Party. The last person they rescued was still eating human flesh when they found him. But there was a full leg of cow, or steer outside. Ox. It was ox leg. It was outside. It was a full leg of it. And his reply was, I didn't like that. It was too dry. He preferred the human flesh over that. And he ended up getting taken back and living a full life, retelling his stories in San Francisco until he died.
Yeah.
But that was kind of reminded me of that, when they were like, oh, the mice taste shitty, but hey, look at this. This tastes great.
I found it interesting that basically Stubby renounces any sort of chance for any sort of personal redemption or being an actual, standard Western hero. I mean, he admits to himself what he is. I'm a gambler. Like, he basically tells Chacho, yeah, I snuck in when you guys were asleep and I killed your two friends, and now I'm going to kill you and you're defenseless. And that's what a gambler does. He doesn't take any fucking chances. He comes in and he stacks the deck to his advantage. And then, he walks off essentially he walks off being Django at that point. Like, he walks off a broken man. He's now a wandering broken man with a broken past, and he's no longer a hero anymore. Whereas in another picture, the right thing to do would probably just stay in the miners community and raise your kid and live happily ever after, probably.
Well, there's no. I mean, we don't really get an indication. He might go back and then, raise.
I get the feeling he doesn't, though. I
kind of thought I thought of There Will Be Blood and Bastard in a Basket. Just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, we don't really know what's going on. Yeah, I kind of got the feeling he doesn't. But that's a narrative convention, right?
Yeah.
The story works best if the miners adopt the kid and raise him as their own.
Yeah,
that's not necessarily a character bit. That's a narrative bit. And that's not a bad thing. That's just that's just how I process that.
Yeah, this film was cut down as well, just like Django Kill. It was cut in a lot of places. The original 104-minute running time was cut down to 87 minutes for the U.S. release. So they basically cut out all the graphic torture and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much all that fun stuff.
The skin cut off the stomach, the lines that Chacho feeds to Stubby in the final scene about how he raped Lynn Frederick's character and all that stuff. That was cut out. It was much more cut and dry. Just sneak out and shoot him, I guess. But of course, all restored now for the current versions that are out there. DVD, Blu-ray. There was a DVD from Anchor Bay in 2001, and then Blue Underground took it up in 2007. It was re-released in the version I have, which is a Midnight Movies collection from Blue Underground that also has 2 other Thomas Milan spaghetti westerns in it, Compañeros and Run Man Run. And there's also... I don't think there's any Blu-rays of this yet, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if they show up soon. Blue Underground's basically in the process of transferring all their library over to Blu-ray, so there you go.
Also, both these films, again, I'll just reiterate, are streaming on Amazon Prime right now, so you can watch both of them. If you are a Prime member, I think you could rent this for like $3 or something, and $3.
Yeah.
Go spend it. It's great,
I dare say this is probably, for me now, one of the top 3 or so Fulci films I've seen. This is actually a pretty major accomplishment as a filmmaker when you compare it to the rest of his work as well. I think there's some really great stuff in this that you don't see in his other work.
Not even. Just look at this. One thing I did want to mention just before we I know we're wrapping up here. This is 75. This is the very end of the Western as the kind of big commercial genre, basically. You really don't have any major Westerns, that are big box office hits after this is kind of a traditional thing. 75 is when the blockbuster is going to happen, the Western goes away. That's what's going to happen. So this is almost for me, this is almost like the great commentary on the Western genre. It is interrogating that genre and doing some. The deep humanism is what I respond to. I know that Fulci was very interested in the gore and the those kind of elements of it, but to me, it's not that. That's not what interests me in this. It is the characters, the communication between them, the relationships, and just the community that's being built. I expected very little coming into this. Quite honestly, it's a phenomenal film. It really
Sometimes
is.
it's best to come into a film like that.
Yeah. I love coming into these things with knowing nothing, but this is an amazing film, and the best thing I've seen from Fulci so far.
I just realized too that the 2 films that always pop into my head when I think about Michael Pollard is he dies in all 3 of them. Yeah, I was thinking about Scrooge and Sleepaway at Camp 3, and then now this. I'm like, what the fucking dies at everything he's in? Jesus.
Yeah, he also popped up in a Rob Zombie film too. He was in House of 1,000 Corpses. And I don't remember he died in that one. I don't think he did.
I don't think he died in that one, no. Okay, so there's one he lived.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a great actor. He's a very underrated actor as well, I think. He's got that, he's sort of on that William Sanderson quality level kind of thing where you've seen his face everywhere and you know who he is, but you don't see him get the big lead parts just because he is that kind of permanent baby face kind of guy. Even now at his age, he still looks like a fucking overgrown child, essentially.
Wasn't it? What was Ron Howard's brother? Is the same way? I think it was Ron Howard's brother.
But he's the most overgrown, ugly child. He's like if the kid from Shane.
Wasn't he an Ice Cream Man?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and he's been in everything. And so that's one of those things. Yep.
Goddamn.
Goddamn.
Yeah. So I guess we can wrap up now. I think basically a recommend for both movies. Definitely 4 of the Apocalypse is. I think we're all in agreement here that it's definitely the one of the 2 to check out if you're going to check out either one of these. Paul, where can people find you on the internet?
PA Brew News, YouTube, PA Brew News Facebook, and then check out Oil Paintings by P. Rameli on Facebook and paulrameli.com.
Yeah. Daniel, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Daniel E. Harper, and you can find all the podcast shit I do and the writing shit I do alwayspaceman.com or at rudertorumpress.com. And I'll not describe that this week because everybody knows. It's fine.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to be doing a Lee Van Cleef episode. So I've got 3 films, and I'm probably going to choose 2 out of the 3. I don't think we're going to do 3 films. I don't know if I have the time to go through 3 films. So we're going to do a couple of classic Lee Van Cleef westerns outside of his Leone stuff. Of course, you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com for all of our links to iTunes, Facebook, YouTube. Go to our Facebook group, join up for They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, leave us comments and questions there. Single best way to get in contact with us. And until then, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining in. It was nice that you got to at least squeeze in for the last one there, Paul.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Riding on a dusty road together, for people who don't know their destiny, trying just to make it to Sun City. The only thing they know is they are free. Moving on, hoping that their fortune soon will come. Moving on through the desert, guided by the sun. Sometimes they made a stop to refresh their faces, to fill their empty water bottles again. How many weeks they have to keep on riding till their troubles end. Moving on, hoping that their fortune soon will come. Moving on through the desert, guided by the sun. Moving on, hoping that their fortune soon will come. Moving on through the desert, guided by the sun. Moving on.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For past episodes, links to the host's other stuff, and links to various podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can also find our iTunes, YouTube, and Facebook links. Please join our Facebook group, as this is the best way to get in contact with us and to keep up to date with what's coming up on the podcast. We also can be found as part of the Oi Spaceman family of podcasts at oispaceman.com, where you can find various sci-fi themed podcasts about Doctor Who, Red Dwarf, Firefly, and classic sci-fi novels. If you decide to subscribe to us through iTunes, please take a moment to leave us a star rating and a review. Thank you. Drive through.